This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy here with another one of our Green Book interview series. And today, something really, really special that we don't get to do very often. I am joined by Kirti Singh, the Chief Analytics and Insights Officer of P&G. Hello, Kirti.
Hi, Lenny. How are you doing?
Doing all right. It's great talking to you. I've had a recent spate of these interviews of folks I've never spoken to before, and you're on that list. You spoke at IAX North America last year. I unfortunately couldn't even make my own event, so we didn't get a chance to meet face to face. And so it's great to have the chance to sit down and chat with you a little bit.
Well, look forward to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, you can tell me afterwards whether that was a true statement.
Whether that still holds.
So last week, I think it was last week, you spoke at TMRE, keynote at TMRE, and you sent out beforehand basically a transcript, a write-up of your talk, and we posted that on Green Book blog, and it got lots of attention. So, I think that's kind of the nature of this conversation, is to follow up on some of the themes that you listed there. And I think the big one that stood out for me was your take on how obviously how technology is impacting the industry as a whole, particularly from a organizational standpoint within P&G. So do you want to kind of sum that up a little bit for folks on your perspective on what's going on there?
Yeah, and what I'd kind of a little bit like to do is to just step back from where we are today and actually dial back, say, 95 years. So think about that. 95. Yes, 95 years ago, right here in Cincinnati, we had a guy called Doc Smeltzer. And P&G had hired him. He was a PhD in economics, and P&G had hired him to really do commodity pricing. And he asked a question within P&G, and the question was, how many women use ivory soap for doing dishes, and how many use it for washing their hands and face? And the interesting thing is, we did not know the answer to that. So Mr. Procter told him that since you've asked the question, go figure out what the answer is. And that really, 96 years ago today, was the start of market research at P&G. And we think it was the start of the industry at that. Now, if you kind of look at it as to what we were doing at that point in time, was that, it was a P&G group, a team of P&Gers who were really doing, frankly, a lot of even the field work ourselves, bringing those, observing consumers, listening to them, bringing those insights back into the P&G offices, and then, helping shape our choices and our decisions. So that has been the history. Then I would kind of say that if you think about the rest of the 90 years that the industry developed, and there was a lot of areas which were required in the ecosystem that was not necessarily a strength of P&G. For example, doing field work for market research, recruiting consumers, and all of that. So we outsourced a lot of that work. Yeah. But dial forward to today, and our realization is that the elements of that ecosystem that needed to be outsourced today can be solved leveraging technology. So that is what, even as TMRE, what I was articulating as the constructive disruption that we want to kind of take this industry through, which is how do we leverage technology to really do a lot of those tasks which previously were done through some of the suppliers and partners that we have. Now, that does not mean that we don't need them. So we still need our suppliers and partners. It's just that what our expectation is of them and what our needs of them has changed dramatically. So it is no longer, doing the kind of field work that we talked about, but much more in this space of, we obviously need data sets that we can leverage to really make the choices that we want. So definitely data sets is a big component of that. We need DIY platforms that enable us to connect with the consumers more directly, and we need doing that. To be able to do that, you need to have good, high-quality consumer panels, which is what we, again, require. So that's really where we are right now. That, if you think about it, that what our expectation and needs are from the suppliers has dramatically changed.
So let's play on that for a minute, because certainly I've advocated for years that the industry as a whole, from a supplier side perspective, can no longer own data collection. Data collection has been democratized, and not just through DIY solutions, but across multiple within
Absolutely.
UX,
Yep, yep.
marketing, and there's lots of ways to collect data now. So the role of research, the research community from a supplier standpoint, has had to evolve from that standpoint. And I think we're seeing that even in some of the larger players that are now bringing in DIY platforms as foundational to the business. Kantar, Ipsos, Nielsen, they've all gone in that direction. So in that scenario where you're leveraging technology to address the nuts and bolts of data collection, right? Those core components. What is the role of the traditional supplier community for P&G then?
Well, as you said, that the traditional supplier community themselves are going through some of the shifts and the changes, right? And that's where we are. So to us, it's not about whether it's a traditional supplier or a new age tech supplier, tech research company. It's really a matter of what is it that they are offering to P&G, and how does that stay up to date with what our needs are in this world when we are open for business with any of them. So we really don't distinguish it so much as to who's a traditional supplier and who's a new tech research. It's just a matter of this is what our needs are and who's best placed to answer that. And sometimes, as you said, that definitely some of the the bigger, what we would call traditional companies, have evolved in that space, which is great to see. And sometimes the newer companies are in many ways also leapfrogging in certain areas, which is also great for us to see. And we are happy to work with any one of them so long as they meet our needs.
So if we push back on that just a little bit, not in a negative way, but more from to dive a little bit deeper. My own view is basically we look at a dichotomy of the industry. There's technology and there's strategic, right? That's clearly the bifurcation that we've seen. And we've talked about technology. So I think the role of the strategic consultancies, that is the interesting evolution that we're seeing now. So for a company like P&G that is embracing a lot of internal capabilities for data collection, what is the role of the strategic consultancies in that scenario? So I think that's what they're all counting on, right? That during this transformation, that's what's going to carry them through. So do you have just a perspective on that?
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a fair build question. I think the role of strategic consulting in a P&G context is less than what it used to be. So that's the reality. Particularly when we think about now P&G is we play in many markets. We have many businesses. So my comment is more related to some of our bigger businesses and in some of our bigger markets, right? So even our needs in different places would be different. So in some of the smaller markets, I may have a different need. But if I think about our bigger, markets and our bigger businesses, that in between intermediary role of looking at the data and then kind of digesting it with perhaps not a full picture of what P&G's business models and strategies were, and then sharing it back with us is what I see diminishing. Because that is the work which is very important and very value added, which I see the analytics and insights discipline within P&G doing that. Because it's a matter of, because anyway, even in the previously, if we be honest to ourselves, some of that work, it had to be reworked because it was being done not with a complete data set, but with a certain piece of information available to them. And that is what we now see as that, we can do it much better ourselves because we have the full information about our business models.
So I totally get that. And I've been privileged to have a front row seat to the transformation of P&G over the course of the last 10, 15 years. I'm not sure if you even are aware of that, but when we started IIX, to a great extent, the IIX event series was built as a stealth vendor identification show for you. The first one that we did was actually in Cincinnati, and it was our first trial one. It wasn't called IIX, but so we've been great partners over the years to be a funnel of identifying new players, right, to come into the market for you. And enhance those capabilities. And what struck me over the years has not been so much the focus on the generic, surveys and focus groups, right? But to push forward in finding new partners that would give you a deeper understanding of the consumer, particularly those things that I kind of bucket in the non-conscious measurement realm, right? There's this great big thing, and whether it's facial coding or implicit or whatever the case has been. So, is that an area of opportunity for new partners to come in for P&G as they're bringing greater insights into the drivers of human behavior versus just the collection of this is the who, what, when, where, how of perception?
Absolutely. But I'll make one more comment on our earlier one, and then I'll come back and talk about the technology that, neurosciences and all of those spaces that you were referring to. Is that, the other objective is one of the things from a business standpoint that we are trying to get at is how do we increase the speed of decision making in today's world? And for that, again, it is very important that P&Gers come directly in touch with our consumers. Whether it is something as simple as being in their homes, listening, observing them, and drawing insights and conclusions from them and activating it on our businesses, or it's through a lens of a data platform, or it is through a lens of DIY research. So that is the piece that we are trying to solve for, is that in today's context, the speed of decision making has to keep pace. In fact, from our standpoint, be ahead of what the speed of the market is. And to be able to do that, we have to make sure that we are much more directly linked with that. So that's, again, kind of just to close on as to why it matters to P&G to have that much more direct access to the consumers and our people working directly in that context. Yeah. Now, then you kind of get down to that if you kind of, again, look at it, that in the recent past, the two areas which I think have really have the potential of transforming the work that we do, one which we have started talking about, which is technology and big data. And the other one is really the advances that have happened in spaces like behavioral sciences. So I think in the last 20 years, what we know about how the human mind works is more than what we knew prior to that, through all the time. So it has been less talked about, but there has really been a lot of progress in that whole space. And that is, of course, very, very important to us. It has many implications for the work that we do. A simple one which you are articulating, absolutely, of kind of thinking about as to how we can use some of that in really understanding our consumers is a very powerful idea. But it basically impacts just about every kind of work that happens in our industry. So even if you take a simple thing like a survey research, which for several reasons I'm less of a fan of, but even if you take something like a survey research, there is a way of asking questions which are much more implicit than the traditional explicit way that has been asked. And that's a very simple application of a BSI principle into how you design a questionnaire. So absolutely, we are very interested in that. And again, very interested in suppliers who are creating tools that allow us to do that, which is do more implicit research, do more application of BSI principles, and certainly leveraging things like neurosciences, which we've been doing actually for quite some time to kind of measure some of our communication touch points.
So here's your opportunity to kind of put out a verbal RFP, if you will. So what is the if there is a supplier who could offer a specific capability or skill set that just you need it, this is part of the strategic plan. What does that look like?
There are many different things. One of the things which I would kind of talk about is that if you look at it, we think about it in terms of outcomes. So much as I love technology, I love our industry, finally, we are a brand building company, right? So we kind of get it back to as to what does it take for us to grow brands and what's the role that, consumer understanding and insights can play in that spaces. And in that, really, there are three areas that we are focused on. The first one is discovering opportunities. The second one is driving consumer centricity in our design and execution through local, authentic insights. And the third one is really actioning growth through things like media and retail analytics. So I'm interested in people having, capabilities across that spectrum of outcomes that we are trying to deliver. But if I kind of call out one, which is discover opportunities, that's a very interesting one, because the way to really go about doing that is this combination of, whether we call it quantitative or qualitative or structured or unstructured or big and small data, and integrating those and really kind of distilling and crystallizing what are some of the opportunities from a consumer or a market standpoint that are out there. So I'm very interested if anybody has got capabilities and platforms in that space.
Now, here's an interesting play on that. In the past, when P&G has identified early stage companies that could meet those needs, you have helped them. You have invested in them in a variety of channels. Is that still
including the neuroscience space that we were talking about previously?
Yeah, I can think of about 4 off the top of my head that I know that you guys helped to elevate. So is that still part of your strategy to be able to engage in a deeper way with early stage companies that you think show promise and can deliver on a need for P&G and help them in that way?
I would articulate it slightly differently, but yes, absolutely. We are very interested in working with all our partners on leading edge capabilities. So some of them could be with early stage companies, some of them could be with established partners. So we are always doing that. So what is important for us is that, in the context of the business problems that we are trying to solve for, if we today don't have a capability that effectively solves that, effectively and efficiently solves for that, we are very interested in partnering in that space, whoever the partner is.
Okay. All right. That's well, you heard it here first, folks. So yeah. So now thinking 3 years out, 3 to 5 years out, you're going through this transformation. First, what does the analytics and insights organization at P&G look like in kind of that future state? And then secondly, what do you think that means for the industry as a whole overall?
Yep. And we talked a little bit about the talent even while I was at TMRE, and I used a phrase there which we said that, really when what we think of and when we are looking at, the people who are really going to be drive breakthroughs in analytics and insight space are rebels with a cause. They are very curious, they're very action oriented, and they have a growth mindset. So really, from that standpoint, it's the impact that matters. Now, underlying to that, I think it's some of the skills that we talked about, which are some of the more harder skills, or hard skills, not harder, but hard skills, which are in two with seemingly different areas, but both of them are very important for us. One of them is deep human and behavioral sciences. So that is critical for us in this space. And the other one is data and analytics. So both of them are very critical. And the best of the players in that have an ability to work with both of them and have the integrative thinking to pull it together and provide business solutions and brand solutions to our businesses.
Okay, so that's so there's the job description, if you will, for both internally at P&G and for your supplier community. I expect the expectation is to fill in those gaps there. So if you had a word of wisdom for the supplier community, and that is a lot of folks who are going to be listening to this are going to be the suppliers, as well as your competitors. I'm sure Stan and some of those guys are going to want to work through these things. But what is what would be your prescription for success moving forward for other players in our industry?
Yeah. And there are really a couple of things which I would kind of say. One is that this is more for an A&I professional. That much as we, as I said, that we like the tools and the technology, it's not about them. It's about impact and it's about growth to our businesses. So be very outcome focused, very outcome driven. That's what matters most to us. And the second thing is whether it is suppliers or some of our young people who are looking at working in this industry, I just think it's just an unbelievably awesome time to be in analytics and insights. And that's why I started with where this world was 95 years ago. Because 95 years ago was an S-curve which was created, which actually stayed in one way or the other in play for a pretty long time. But this generation of players, whether you are on the supplier side or you are an A&I professional, you have the opportunity to truly transform this industry, to cause a constructive disruption and create the next S curve, which I find very, very exciting. And in all of these areas, and which really kind of enables, whichever company that you're working for to drive growth the way that we haven't seen before.
All right, so we're heading cautious of time. There's a couple more questions I want to get in, and this one maybe not so positive as the rest of it. What's that nagging fear that keeps you awake at night? What's the storm cloud that you're thinking, man, if this happens, we're going to have a problem. This is going to be challenging. Anything that you could share, and not just P&G specific. Thinking about the broader industry.
If you think about right now, it gets more from a business standpoint in the macroeconomic areas, right? Which is what we are all kind of looking at. That as you kind of look at the reality is that right now most of the major economies have been doing quite well. And one of the things which we do know is a big part of our driver of our growth is the market growth, and really keeping a very close eye on that as the macro economies change as to whether there's going to be a shift to what we have been seeing.
Okay. Anything that's more specific to the insights industry, like for instance, data privacy legislation, or something of that nature that you think, if these things occur, this could have profound impact directly on the way that the insights functions.
Nothing that worries me. I think there are obviously things which we'll need to work around and see as to how, if the A happens, and what would be a path to that. But really, the thing which, if you ask me in the A&I space, that the thing which worries me is not necessarily what happens to us, but what we do or don't do ourselves. And we will let an opportunity slip by. That's, if anything, is my worry, that we will not go all in and truly see, with the transformation that we are talking about, whether it's in the area of data and technology or in the area of behavioral and neurological sciences, and truly leverage them to transform this 100-year-old industry. So it would be, if my sleep loss issue would be an opportunity loss issue rather than anything else.
Is there something that you think may fit that category, like VR or AR or something, some cool emerging technology that has the opportunity to potentially change the game both on a social level, the way that consumers engage with each other in technology, but also has implications for the research industry?
I think all of them.
Yeah.
I think all of them have, and that's what makes it so exciting, and that's what we should keep a very open and a growth mindset in that space, and experiment with a few of these and see what works and what doesn't. I think many times what also kind of happens, which becomes then a little bit of a challenge, is that anytime a new shiny tool comes, then you have as many people using that as a label and start selling snake oils rather than the real thing. And that's the other thing which, as an industry, we need to be careful of, that, not go by labels, but really, if you are truly interested, each of those technologies has got a potential or capabilities even beyond. Some of them are technology-based, some of them are science-based, have got the potential to truly transform and take this industry way forward. But what we have to be careful of is that we are being authentic and genuine to them.
Yeah, I would agree. Fit for purpose, right? Experiment and find the fit for purpose. So, Kirti, you've been very generous with your time. Very appreciative of that. Is there any last thing that you would like to touch on or to say to our audience?
Let's make it happen.
There we go. Call to action. So, all right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Hope that we get to do this again. Touch base to see how the progression is coming. And congratulations on all the success with leading P&G through this interesting time.
Thanks, Lenny. Much appreciated. Take care. Bye for now.